Hello and welcome to Latitude Photography Podcast. This is a YouTube live edition where we're going to be talking about and reviewing listener submitted images. I'm grateful that you're here. I'm grateful that Drake is here. Drake, welcome to this Latitude Live.
Hi, Brent. It's great to be back again. I'm looking forward to taking a look at some of these images.
Yes, we got a lot of great images coming from a lot of the listeners who submitted via the Facebook group, and we do this about once a month. And the point that we're looking to do here is we just want to welcome those submissions from the listenership. We want to give a little bit of feedback, give a little bit of just ideas, whether it's something that's really working, maybe there's just some challenges with the image. Really, it can also be about some of our just basically our impressions, our ideas of what's going on with these images and, what makes them work, what makes us, why do we like them, why do we not like them, those kinds of things. And sometimes we get, some really cool images that just kind of move us a little bit. And I remember, I think it was in the last one where I kind of just had a description of an image where, I said it kind of looks like it tastes like peaches. And I mean, that's what it was. The sky was just so delicious. And so there's lots of, I think there's just lots of opportunities to kind of have fun with these images. That's what we're trying to do here, is just have a good time reviewing some images from the listeners over there at Latitude Photography Podcast. The way to do that, if that's something you're interested in partaking in, we usually collect them through the Facebook group. So you need to be a part of the Facebook group and just search for Latitude Photography Podcast over there on the Facebook, and you'll be able to see what the next topic is. And the topic for March we'll be announcing here at the end of this broadcast. So Drake, how are things going over in your neck of the woods? You're from Vancouver Island, and what are things like going on over there?
It's more of the same with the COVID restrictions, so it's harder to get out and do much. But it's beautiful right now for
Yeah.
weather-wise. The flowers are blooming everywhere. The waterfalls are running great. It's been a couple of weeks since I've been out to get any, but
Nice.
you get some great shots if you go into the woods right now.
Yeah, nice. Waterfalls being one of my most favorite of
Yeah.
subjects for sure. Weather's warming up here a little bit. Flowers are going crazy here on the farm. We're just loving the new property, and we're able to, I mean, there's just so many flowers that the previous owners had planted, and every time there's just a surprise. So we have lots of spring surprises coming through. All right, with all the listeners out there, Nathan just chiming in. Good evening, gents, he says. Thank you, Nathan. I'm glad you're here. And if anyone else is here, I would love to have you drop something in the chat box. Give me a thumbs up. Give me whatever you want to give me with just a little notion so I know you're out there. And we'll be transitioning here now to our first picture and what we're going to be looking at. So this picture is submitted by Jeff Groat. And I probably should say, if I'm getting pronunciations wrong, I certainly apologize, and I invite maybe later, I don't know how we can do it, but let me know if there's a better way to pronounce your name. Certainly the topic is in the water. And so this idea with in the water, what we're looking for here, it's all about things that are literally in the water, things that are, when I first announced it, I was like, maybe you're scuba diving, maybe you have something that's in the rain, it's just drenched in water, maybe it's something floating in water like we have these leaves. And Levi Jensen from Minnesota, that's awesome. I'm hoping to actually come visit you here in September. Bruce Rawlinson, excellent. Glad to see you here. Jerry Sargent, Peter, thank you. From Brisbane, Australia. That's awesome. Welcome. I don't even know what time it is there. Probably early morning, I'm guessing. Really appreciate you being here. That's awesome. All right, so get back on this one, Jeff. Early autumn in Minnesota, and he said he had been in a kind of a photographic slump. I certainly know what that's like. Drake, you mentioned when you were talking initially about the COVID restrictions. Would you say that maybe there's a photographic slump that you might be in a little bit too?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when I do get out there and get to do something, it's such a relief, and you feel so much better. But
Yeah.
And most of the time, you're just sitting at home wishing you were out there, and yeah, just don't have that energy to go out right now with everything going on.
And Jeff is actually watching. Thank you, Jeff. And it's grotty, like karate, he said. So thank you, Jeff. I will never forget that. So, Lake Maria State Park, which is just 5 miles from my house. Oh, that's so cool. And I see he's armed with his Nikon and a couple of lenses. There's not much that's more scenic than fall colors after all. I could not agree more. This coming from a guy who has lived for, I don't know, 25, 26 years in a location where fall colors just is not that big of a deal here in southeastern Washington, northeastern Oregon. Certainly we get some areas that have some fall color, but most everything, if we have some foliage around, usually it's in the neighborhood of, evergreens and things like that. So this image is a nice tight cluster of 3 leaves, a red leaf, a green leaf, and a yellow leaf, all kind of stacked on each other. They're floating in the water. We have a couple of ripples coming off to the right-hand side where it looks like maybe a drop had been dropped on to a drop of water. And we can really see the water tension, the leaves breaking that water surface tension with some shapes, some liquid type shapes kind of emanating off of that. And we have some really bright colors, some really saturated bright yellows, the red and the green kind of sort of. It's not like an electric green. I would not want an electric green on this. Centrally composed, nice dark edges. Drake, what are your thoughts on this as we kind of look at taking this image apart a little bit?
I really do like the combination of colors there. It's actually almost like a stoplight with the red, green, and yellow.
Is.
But looks really nice, and the surface tension and those drops, I think they add a nice touch to it with the concentric rings going out there. I'm not sure if it's just my monitors. It's probably the Facebook compression, but in the red leaf, there seemed to be some digitization, a little bit chunky looking on my monitor. I don't know if you get that as well. Or
I'm not picking up too much of that, but I think I can see where you're coming from there. We do have a little bit of glare, it seems like, coming off of the water. And yeah, it might be a little bit of that JPEG artifacting. I certainly wouldn't blame Jeff's technique or nothing like that on there.
Yeah, so overall, I really like this one.
The thing that really gets me on this, I think the reason I like things that are working for me on this image, not just the colors, but we have these 2 different types of leaves. So he can correct me if I'm wrong. He's watching, so thank you. But the yellow and the red, those are maple leaves. And then I think that green leaf, that looks more like an oak leaf. And so just that variation of shape and overall, the curves of the oak versus the points of the maple. I like those types of contrasts when I see something like that. It's not something to me that really jumps out and says, hey, slaps me on the face and says, here's differences and whatever else. It's one of those more subtle things that just, my brain is just like, yeah, that's kind of nice. It feels natural, feels good. And certainly the nice bright colors is always nice to catch your attention as well. And Minnesota looks like it's going to be a great place. He says I'm correct. So I did know a few things about some leaves, it looks like. So that's awesome. All right. So the next image that we're going to be looking at is this sunset type image from Colin Meyer. I don't have any context when he submitted this image. It was just the basic image submission. At least that's how I captured it anyway. We're seeing the Facebook, when I click on the image and Facebook shows the image large, we're just seeing that coming through here. But we have a square frame, and the sunset is right there in the middle of the frame. And it looks like we have this area right on the edge of the beach where we have this swimming pool, basically, right on the edge of the beach. And we have a few people, milling about the swimming pool on the edge of the pool. They're in the pool, but they're on the edge. And then we have... let's see, the horizon is roughly just a little bit underneath the middle zone, maybe a little bit on top of the rule of thirds area as it cuts across the way there. And mostly a monochromatic image where we have some cool hues And actually, no, that's about right in the middle of that horizon. But we have, mostly some cool hues, and then we have just a little bit of orange right there around the sun. And what do you think there, Drake?
Yeah, the um, sun being just off a little off center too draws your eye there. Obviously, that's the bright point. There's a lot of brightness in the pool too with the lighter color of the water, so that sort of draws the focus that way. Um, I'm not sure. It might look better as a more of a standard crop
Yeah,
with less sky in it, less of those dark clouds up top, and then you would focus. That would move your horizon line up to about the 2/3 mark there, more of a rule of thirds thing. Um, and it's a little dark overall to me, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. It just makes you wonder a little bit more about the shadows. You can see some stairs going
sure.
up there and things like that. So, yeah, my biggest thing is that it'd be nice to see maybe a little more color in the sky, a little more lighter, but less of the sky, less of those clouds up top, I think.
Yeah, I think that's the first thing I want to look at myself is chopping the top right above that first layer of clouds. And when you do that, and I mean, kind of holding my arm up, to have my hand block it out on screen so I can kind of envision what would that look like. When you do that, you totally change up the composition of the image. And to me, what that does is it really would strengthen that swimming pool curve. We have that line of the edge of the pool, and it would strengthen that line and be a little more powerful in bringing you in. And then it also strengthens the position of the sun. And I think everything just becomes more impactful when you do that. When you would crop out, all those clouds above, and then some of that blank sky too. But yeah, otherwise, to me, you mentioned the darkness. I'm actually not. To me, I'm not really desiring it to be too much brighter, if any at all, in those shadow areas, because what I really like is those skimming reflections off the pool. It really highlights that area and brings the eye right there. And then that dark area underneath it is just a nice, super, super supporting element for that pool. And so visually, it's really strong. All right, this next image is fairly interesting. We got a lot of color in this image, and then we've got that blowing stuff in the tree. It looks like it's blowing anyway. Let's read what he says. Gary Adickman in the water. Blue Cypress Lake, Vero Beach, Florida. The sun was setting behind me, which added color to the clouds and gave an orange cast to the tree. These cypress trees grow in the water. A few weeks after this shot, I went back for sunrise and went out on a pontoon boat. These trees are popular nesting sites for osprey, and there were scores of them nesting and flying about. Now, that would be really cool, too. Throw on a 400 millimeter, 600 millimeter lens and see if you can get some of the osprey. But anywho, so the cypress tree. The only thing that really I kind of wish was a little bit different on this shot is that thing right in the midground where we have what looks like, I don't know if it's a stump or just a cluster of bushes or whatever, because we do have some layering. We got the foreground elements, we have some of the sea with a few leaves coming up, then we have this mid cluster, and then we have the really cool tree doing its thing and the color behind it with the clouds all lit up. It's just that central thing that I wish, I don't know, for me, my mind is just, it gets caught up in that. I don't know. What do you think, Drake?
Yeah, I agree. It takes a little away from it because it doesn't seem to, and there's no separation that you can see between that and the actual
Yeah.
tree and bushes that are with the tree.
And,
Aside from that, it would be interesting to see with the water done as a long exposure to smooth it out a little more, I think.
yeah.
Um, but that might involve some blending, a little more, definitely more involved if you want to do that, because if you did it long enough to blur the water with all that moss hanging from the tree, you're
Yeah.
probably going to get too much motion.
Yeah, I can see that though. With it would totally change this to a completely more abstract rendition of itself. And all of a sudden, when you say that, I envisioned what it would be like to have that moss just blowing with a long exposure. That would be so fun to experiment with, to see what it's going to look like. Now I want to definitely get down there and try that. That would be so cool, I think. But the lighting is really strong on this image. The color, with the clouds behind, the way it's lighting up the tree, the somewhat glaring type reflection we have on the ocean, I think actually works here. And absolutely. I think the lighting is definitely well done for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I like the way the colors go from the pinkish at the top down to the light blue at the bottom, and nice flow to it.
All right, so this next image, whenever you get an image like this, well, first off, it feels like it's flooded, but whenever you get an image like this, I just, for some reason, feel super peaceful in that, there's this structure. It's out in the middle of nowhere. It feels like it's out in the middle of nowhere. And then we have this lone tree right next to it. And, there's a sense of desolation where it's just, again, middle of nowhere type of idea. But it also just makes me feel a little bit more peaceful. This is by Stronghill. He says, this boathouse sits in the water of Llyn Ogwen in Snowdonia, North Wales. The sunrise this morning in December of 2019 was a little disappointing, but the overcast sky wasn't going to stop me from photographing this popular location. I'm so glad, hallelujah, because overcast skies, they still can be a lot of interest there. If they're too thick, that's where I'd be like, nope, don't even include the sky, or very, very minimally include the sky. And that's, I think, what he did here. It's very minimally included, and we have the mountain on both sides. We have the tree coming up in the middle. So, the sky isn't one of those things that we're just forced, if you will, to look at. He continues on, I'd rather have lots of clouds with some character than cloudless blue skies. Absolutely. I totally agree. So what are some other things that are working or maybe not so much working for you, Drake?
Well, I do like the shape of the land, the way it sort of rolls towards the towards the building there, and the fact that the mountains come down in a V. Everything sort of draws your eye to that point.
Yeah.
It's another one of these that makes me want to be there. I want to get out there with my camera and see this for myself, and it would be so nice. The one thing I thought maybe you could do slightly different on this, between the actual building itself there and the land, you don't really see the water. If you could have got a little closer, or maybe just a little bit higher, so that you could see a little more separation between the land where that ends and the building starts, I think that would have made it a little stronger. But again, a great image.
So where you're talking on that is where that green patch of grass is, and it goes up towards the green door. We really don't have separation between the land and the boathouse. And you're saying if it were possible to somehow configure that in the composition, maybe it would work well.
Yeah. So then it would look a little more separate from everything.
Yeah, sure. And to contrast that, I'm super thrilled though that, and I don't know if this was Ian's plan or not, but I'm super thrilled to not see a convergence in the roof line with the landmass behind it. So absolutely, if you had to make a choice, this would be the choice to make. If you could make both of them, okay, that's great too. But at least that roof line didn't merge into the ground behind it. And then the other thing I really like,
the tree isn't breaking it either.
Right. Yes. The tree is also, it comes very close, but it doesn't come into the boathouse. That was also good compositional decision. And that tree, it does blend into the background on the left-hand side, but it's kind of like, who cares? That's not something that we're going to be really concerned about. I don't find my eye is concerning itself with that anyway. I still get some texture of the tree. I still get the texture of the rocks coming through. And so it just comes together all right for us. All right, the next one, I was so thrilled to see this one coming in because I know she had gone out and I believe shot this fairly recently anyway. Let's read about this one. Sandy Glenn Brown, the tide recedes but leaves behind bright seashells on the sand. The sun goes down, but gentle warmth lingers on the land. Okay, we have a bit of a poet here as well. The music stops, yet echoes on the street on the sweet refrains. For every joy that passes, something beautiful remains. Author unknown, she says. And then her input is, dragging the shutter at first light, Jekyll Island, Georgia. So, yeah, I believe they went out. They had a meetup. These are some listeners. They kind of went and formed their own meetup group on Facebook, and so they're even trying to meet up in Charleston in August and things like that. And I'm just like, oh, that's so good. Charleston's such a great city to shoot in. But anyway, let's not get ourselves distracted. We have here a shell in a dark sandy beach, and then we just have water flowing around as the waves are crashing in, waves are crashing out, whatever. Relatively even light, and then we have, as she said, the dragging the shutter, so it's a really long shutter speed, so lots of motion coming around that shell, and that's something that I really find intriguing about water. That's why water is probably one of my most favorite subjects to shoot, because we can have that opportunity to experiment with the shutter speed, and we can have a little bit of motion depending on how fast the water is going compared to our shutter speed, or we can have a lot of motion where it just totally silks out. And here we have something that's getting close to that silkiness effect, but we still have it slow enough to still see some texture going in there. And so it's nice, I think, to still see a little bit of texture going in there. What are your thoughts, Drake?
I agree with you completely on that. The silkiness of it, the motion that you can see, it feels like the water is moving from this. It's not frozen in time, right? It looks like the water flowing by, and the lines of water lead you right towards that shell that's there as they separate around it. It's a really good look. The shell is maybe a touch bright, but I've got two different monitors going. One of them, it's pretty much bang on. So
Sure, okay.
it's probably just my other monitor, but
Yeah.
it really is nicely done, and the fact that it's slightly off center is nice
Yeah.
too. If it was dead center in that, I think it would be a little more boring and static feeling. But this is quite nice.
Yeah, the shape of it definitely helps with its slight off-centeredness. The subtlety of the colors, she didn't punch the colors. You could have easily, I think, overpunched the colors here. And yeah, overall it feels really good in those regards, the color and such. What I may have thought to do, though, what I may suggest or may think about, I wonder if there's a composition that she has out there, and that is, rather than placing it slightly to the right, how would it be if it were placed slightly to the left? Because the visual weight of the shell is on the left-hand side, and I'm just curious, is it better if it were more on the left-hand side than it is slightly to the right? But then we have more of that negative space on the right-hand side, where it's a darker negative space. So that's just where, yeah, I'm not... It's sometimes these things are hard to envision, and we have to experiment before we really truly understand, yes, I like this one better. This one achieves my goals more acutely than, say, the other composition. But overall, still a very positive, a very, very strong composition. All right, this next one here, also at the seashore, shall we say, the water's edge, and we have a fellow big old tattoo on his back. He's got some flippers, relatively blonde hair. Peter Turnbull is the photographer here, and he says, took this at the end of the Waikiki Wall back in the day when we could fly from Australia to Honolulu. I noticed the locals would jump off the end of the wall rather than paddle out from the beach. While technically not, quote, in the water, I liked this one rather than the shots I got of them riding the waves because of the anticipation, the expectation, and a good afternoon session. Moments after I took this shot, he took the leap and was off. And so I didn't hit the C more, so I don't have the other items that he wrote there. But this, yeah, the surfboard, boogie board, whatever it is he has, nice bright electric green. We have certainly the water is a good blue, like you would expect in Hawaii. The subject is placed off to the side, on the right hand side. The only thing that's kind of sort of curious to me is also that the subject, his body is faced that direction, but that's also where the sun is coming from. So what do you think, Drake? What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, the direction he's facing, it was something that got me as well. I would have liked to see him looking into the center because he's off on the right side, so over to the left. Or even better is if the photographer could have gone slightly to his right, so that the subject was on the far left, because that
Sure.
bright green board is a nice part of it. And if he turned facing straight forward in that, you might lose a lot of the board. But the colors in it are really nice. I do think this sky seems a little bit extra blue. I'm not sure if there's maybe a circular polarizer, or just the way that the color was done there, but
Yeah.
little bit deeper than I would have liked to see.
Yeah.
But everybody has their own taste in how subtle or not. But overall, yeah, I like the color combinations, and it does give you the feel of exactly where he is, like a Hawaii type space.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that certainly isn't something you would want to ask the person, oh, you're looking the wrong way, kind of a thing. That's totally about you as a photographer, like you mentioned. If you were to be able to position yourself quickly to the other side, I do really appreciate the position, though, of those three people that are in the water. Those do come out very well. And so that is a good balancing item, a good balancing piece of information, in your overall composition. But yeah, I just wonder what it would be like if we had a shot where he was positioned on the left side of the frame, and then we'd see a little bit of his face. Of course, then you also might want to think about, do we have his permission to publish the image and things like that? Because usually the face is what we would think about for, identifiable traits and things about people. Not that tattoo is also very identifiable too, though. Very unique to this person.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. This next one, a very detailed image. Another leaf in water. This one's a green one. Boy, we're really zoomed in. This almost feels like a macro. This is Brett Baker submitting this one. He says, captured this back in 2006. That's a little bit ago. That's awesome to go back and dig up some images and get them coming through here. That's awesome. He was in Juneau, so that's Alaska, with a borrowed Fuji Fine Pix. This and a few other photos I got on the trip were the first sparks of my interest in photography. Yes, so this is awesome. I love to see these kinds of things. And I have an image, when he says first sparks, I have an image that I got in North Cascades National Park. That was one of my first sparks in selling photography, because it was the first one I sold as a stock image. And it was just so simple, and so like I was just waltzing down a trail, and all of a sudden I saw this little sprig of a spruce, and I was like, oh, that looks interesting. Snap, tripod and everything, so it was more than just a snap. I waltzed along and ended up being my first sale for a stock photo. But that's that first figment of, ooh, this can actually work, kind of an idea. Of course, that was quite a while ago as well. Stock photos not being, what they are what they were back then. Anyway, let's get back on track. So his first sparks of his interest in photography. So while they aren't the best photos I've ever taken from a technical perspective, they are, in another more important sense, the most important photos in my collection. Absolutely, the foundational sparks of the interest in photography, and realizing this is something that's really cool. This is something that can satisfy that creative itch that we all hopefully have, some kind of creative itch that we're able to express our creativity in some way, shape, or form as humans. And, for you and me, Drake, and everyone listening, watching, photography is like, that major thing here. So we have water flowing over the leaf. The water is fully drenched in the water, as it were. And we have just lots of that shape of the water. It feels like molten glass kind of a thing going over the edge, optically distorting the details, the color of the leaf, all those. It's just a really beautiful image, I think, because of the visual imperfections, which is the water distortion. That's, in my mind, my estimation, is what actually makes it work.
That's right. It's nice. It smooths out everything. It gives it a nice flowing feel to it, almost like glass, like there, the water on it.
Yeah.
I do notice if you look at the left-hand side, you'll see it's relatively sharp under the water, and
Okay.
the leaf doesn't quite have the same sharpness there. It looks like the focus was slightly off. It would be nice to see the leaf a little crisper. But as he says, this was taken back in 2006 with the Fuji Fine Pix, so probably not as easy to get that dead tack sharp focus on it.
Yeah.
But I like the flow of it, and just the general idea of this is really nice.
All right, this next image, a couple of Canada geese. See, good morning from Pittsburgh, he says. Spring in full bloom for these two geese. And so they're kind of coming together. They're one beak is kind of coming into the others. They're kind of sort of facing each other. They're backlit. We have some sparklies, in the water from the refraction of the sun reflecting off the water. And so these two geese are they're close in proximity, but they're certainly not actually touching. And then we just have it receding off in the background with the water receding in the background. And then we have a fairly present vignette where it really keeps the eye in towards the subject. I do find myself that the vignette is just a touch on the strong side, but otherwise, we really see the good shapes of the birds, water dripping off their beaks, water splashing around, sort of thing. Even some water on their backs, which is kind of cool because they've obviously been, flopping around, trying to clean themselves or whatever.
Yeah, the sparkles on the water are really nice touch with it. With the one exception of the one up the top right on that edge, that bright spot draws my attention up there, and it makes that darker vignetting more noticeable. And I don't think you really want to notice it. You want it to be there without drawing your attention, which unfortunately that did. The geese themselves look really nice. They're in a good position, although if he would have had a little more opportunity to have just, again, that separation so the one beak isn't behind the other, might have been a little more of an ideal type picture. But you still, I think you get the idea of what they're doing and swimming together, and it almost forms like a heart between them the way they are. So it's really a nice looking shot.
Yeah, and that bright spot way up there on the edge, cropping off 2 or 3% of the image is all it would take, and I think that would work well. Or you could use the spot removal tool in Lightroom if you're using Lightroom, and that would take care of it too. All right, nice, strong, dynamic lines in this next image by Terry Brockway Holdren. She says, let's see, I was visiting a local lake in Des Moines, Iowa at sunset back in November, and this reflection of the pedestrian bridge over the lake caught my eye. Absolutely, yes, that would catch my eye too, I believe, where we have these, it's a curved pedestrian bridge, concrete structure underneath, but the thing about it are these lights on the outside edge, the outside edge of the railing that's keeping the people from falling into the water. And of course, they're reflected in the water. We've got some great color off on the horizon, very deep orange-red color, transitioning to a nice, natural feeling, rich blue color in the twilight type evening. Close to the center of the image, there's a single bright spot, a street lamp that has a little bit of a star pattern to it. So that tells me she was using a possibly a fairly small aperture to really get that water to just go really smooth, which the water is definitely very smooth. So we have a sense of that small aperture, and so we get that starburst there. But I just wonder if she had the opportunity to shift herself one way or the other to block that light. That's about the only thing that's really just like, if we could have gotten rid of that. Because and the reason I say that is my eye is going down, up and down the line of the bridge. And I think that's what we want it to do. But every single time it stops right there on that light, on that little pinprick of light that has a little bit of a starburst to it. What do you think, Drake?
Yeah, that's something that definitely draws the eye along there. Normally, I love starburst on lights and that.
Sure.
But in this case, the placement of it and the fact that it's the only light that has starburst really singles it out and makes you stop there. Whereas otherwise, the curve of the bridge, and it's darker on the right-hand side where it starts, it leads you nicely across that beautiful sky during the blue hour to where those trees are on the left, and the payoff of seeing those silhouetted in there, and the nice reflections. That really is the only thing, that one light is the only thing that detracts from any of it. And if there's got to be a detraction, that's not horrible. So
yeah. All right, and also what I probably should invite folks that are watching, if you've got things, I've got the little chat window up here, and if there's things that you want to call out, by all means, I want to invite that. So feel free to speak up through tapping your fingers on your device, whether you're on the phone, an iPad, or your computer, whatever the case may be. I invite that. That would be just fine. All right, we actually have another one here from Ian Stronghill. I usually only try to get one, and I sometimes say, I'll do two. So anyway, we have another one here from Ian in the water, of course. Let's see, it says, there's patterns in this water. The freezing action in this puddle has formed these beautiful shapes that remind me of contour lines in a map. Absolutely, yeah, that does look really good. And makes me think of contour lines too. And I think I remember someone saying it looks like a cross-section of certain rocks, like if you polished a rock and something like that, where it might look something like that too. And so, yeah, there's different ways that we can kind of see different things in this type of image. It's a vertical image. We have these I can't say that word. Concentric. There we go. I finally got it too. So concentric circles, but it's not even circles. They're mostly oval, but they're just highly irregular, kind of conforming to the land, as it were. And then we have a bush with some hoarfrost there, and then some fairly moody clouds up above. And one thing I like about this too is it is cropped on the bottom. Pretty much all we have there is ice, and so we're limiting the view of the viewer and saying, nope, all you can see is this ice. And I actually appreciate that rather than having more land down there, because it just, I think, will strengthen the visual energy of those lines and what we're seeing there as they circle around and they get more and more tighter in on that central location. What are your thoughts there, Drake?
Yeah, that circle of ice really does have almost a topographic map feature to it, and it really draws the eye to it right away. It's almost like a bullseye. It's brighter than everything else, and that's your focus, and it's nice and sharp and clear. What's above it on the top half of the frame is nice. You see it looks like some frost on the grasses that are there, and some nice clouds that are getting a little softer on focus, like really nicely done, so that all of your attention focuses down on that ice and those rings. And again, I agree that having any more before it probably what I detracted from the circles themselves, the ice.
Yeah, and Bruce, he comments, I might experiment with cropping the sky out. Are you talking? I think you're talking about this one, Bruce, the with the ice below, and you would experiment cropping the sky out of this image. Yeah, that might enhance some of the intention on the ice as well. Um, and then Peter, I think, let's see, your image was, yes, the surfer with the tattoo on his back. He commented he's agreed with the framing comments, but the guy literally walked up beside me and jumped. Not a lot of time for discussion and posing. Yeah, that's the thing with these types of sessions is, Drake and I live in utopia world when we're talking about these things, and we totally, absolutely know. I mean, I've been in Hawaii, not really to photograph surfers or such, but yeah, I totally know what you're saying. When something like that, you just roll with it and see what goes. And so yeah, Bruce confirms talking about this one image that is currently on screen with the ice down below. Yeah, that would be an interesting. I'm trying to hold again with the other monitor that I have the image up on. I might go if I'm going to crop the sky out. I think I might even go to a square crop and just crop out that line of trees as well. And then that will really focus in on the ice and the bush behind it, and you have those two things only. And it's just constantly your eye is going back and forth between those two very different textures in the subject. And that's there's some potential there for sure. All right, our next image, very bright, very. This is another Canada goose, and we just have some fall color reflecting off the water. We have nothing else. It's just the goose is right in the middle. We've got some lines which look like, they're tree trunks. We have the color coming in from reflection off the leaves of the trees. He says, let's see, some details in the comments. So let's see, Drew Sanford took this picture at Oak Mountain State Park in Alabama while I was down there working. I would get up in the morning and make a point to check the lake from the porch of whichever cabin we were in. And then I didn't hit the see more, so I'm losing out there on any further comments for tonight's discussion. But the thing about this one is I do really appreciate where the goose is in relation to the reflections. I think with where it's between these two vertical uprights, which are, of course, the tree trunks that are reflecting, but also the goose is right smack dab in the middle. And so what I would hope for is to give us either zoom in more strongly if we have the opportunity. Like I said, Drake and I are living in utopia world right now. We have the maximum zoom from 3 millimeters to 3,000 millimeters. When we're talking, I wish we could do this, I wish we could do that. Certainly, we don't have the idea of reality, shall we say, of being there in the flesh. But something, if we're going to leave it centrally focused, centrally composed, I would say zoom in just a touch more, or let's go ahead and move that off center just a little bit and see what we can do to bring in some of that other colors, some of the other items, and balance this goose, this thing that's the only thing that's in focus, that's sharp, that's rendered, and you know exactly what the outline is and all other good stuff. Let's shift it a little bit off focus, off center. I think that might help just a little bit.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, Drake. Bruce mentioned it would be a nice shot without the goose as well. And yeah, it would be an amazing shot without the goose too. Not that we're going to fire a gun and scare him away or nothing, but yeah, if you happen to have a shot like this, an abstract without the goose, oh yeah, that would just, that would be cool. Sorry, I interrupted you, Drake. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, that's okay. Like you were saying, our comments obviously are ideal situations, or maybe for next time it might be something to try.
Yeah.
Like the one suggestion I have on here, the out of focus branches that you can see going across add some interest.
Yeah, they actually
But I'd
do.
like to see it without that as well to see what it looks like.
Sure.
It may be more interesting this way. It's just the longer I look at it, it becomes a slight distraction. But the photo is beautiful. It almost looks like a painting. It gives that really nice feel to it with the colors almost blending into each other.
Yeah.
Like you say, the only thing sharp is that goose and maybe some of the rings immediately around them in the water.
Sure.
But everything else is subtle, wavy feeling, and again, well placed between the trees so that there's not a dark line running through it or anything else. Um, and yeah, ideally maybe could be a little farther to the left. I don't know if he'd swung the camera right. What was there? It looks like it might be going into more green and lose some of the colors that attract you. But um, just because that's the way he's facing, it might seem a little more interesting there. But I don't
Sure.
think it really hurts it too much being in the center here. You're with everything else going around, the darkness on the upper left and the different shades on the right. It draws your eye nicely to that goose in the center.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned those branches that are out of focus. We do have some branches that are much closer. It feels like they're much closer to the photographer, to us. And because we're focusing so far out, then they've gone out blurry. But they do provide this interesting, potentially interesting pattern, this interesting shape that's interrupting the overall reflections and everything else. And I certainly agree. I want to see both, but I'm not totally bothered by them. I think it does provide enough interest, but for my eye, for myself, when I see it smaller, because I have it on two screens, when I see it bigger, that's my point. I'm not bothered by it. When I see it smaller, then that's almost all I see. So it's weird
Yeah,
in
I
that
have the same
respect
thing.
too.
It seems a lot darker on the smaller screen and a lot
Yeah,
more clear, whereas
yeah,
it blends in a little bit more on the larger version.
yeah. All right, this next one, another bridge shot. This is by Chad Holliday. The Big Four Bridge spanning the Ohio River. All right, and we got some color on here. We've got some blue lights, red lights, a little bit of green lights, barely visible on those green lights. And then way off to the left, we have what seems to be a lot of lights that are aiming more towards the camera. They're reflecting a lot off the water. And then off to the side, underneath the bridge and way off to the right-hand side, we have just the lights of the city and other bridges and whatnot coming through, reflecting off of as well. So what we really have is a lot of just this dynamic idea of color going through with all these different colored lights. And I really do appreciate, I appreciate the effect of the color going on. And I think there's a lot of good things happening here. What I would probably recommend trying to do is maybe even shift our view. Again, I don't know what's to the right of the camera, but if there's nothing more to the right of the camera, just more city, I might suggest we shift our view just a hair, or maybe zoom in just a hair, because we do have a little bit of that ground, something in the foreground there in the lower right-hand corner. But I would say shift a little bit to the right and a little bit down, or otherwise zoom in to crop that out as well. But that will make that would take the bridge a little more towards the top of the frame and make that, I think, even a stronger element. And then it would be more of this interaction between this really strong element and the background elements. And so we could get that conversation going a little more in that regard. Any other thoughts you have there, Drake?
Yeah, I was thinking with the crop and the view on that, if you went with maybe a 16:9 so that you cut off a little more of the bottom there,
Yeah.
because I find the bridge and whatnot in the background, the other ones interesting,
Yeah.
and I wouldn't want to lose too much of that either. Um, the top left is a little bit dark. I don't know if you'd be able. Again, it's one of these ideal situations. If you could move farther left on the left and swing the camera to the right, repositioning so there's a little less sky, but I don't know if that would make a significant difference either. It, it's a nice shot with all the reflections on the water and the different colors. I don't know where those the reds and greens come from. If those are lights on the bridge that are lighting it up like traffic lights, or just the way it's lit. Because I mean, obviously the main structure is blue, so it's interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting because it seems like there's some reason you have multicolored lights on there, and so I don't know. I don't see any commentary as to why they're different colors. Maybe that's just the way it is. I don't know. But yeah, I kind of like your idea of that 16 by 9 type crop, and then you really don't have to do much of anything to
Mhm.
the image otherwise. All right, we are going to image 14 of 26, so we're keeping it rolling here. More leaves in the water. This is almost a full square crop, slightly horizontal, I think, is what I'm picking up on. Michael Bramley, and there's no commentary there, so we just get to go straight off and start talking about it. So this is an interesting shot, in part because we have these complementary colors contrasting each other. We got the red of the leaves in a water that is reflecting greenery from all around. And so we just with those reddish pinkish leaves and the greenery, good complementary colors, and that just there's just that certain, I don't know, there's something visually intriguing when we have these colors like this that are together in the same shot. Underneath the water, underneath this initial leaf, we have a more decomposed leaf that's really bright yellow, and that's coming through as well. And then about the only thing that I find distracting is this thing in the lower right-hand corner where it's breaking the surface of the water. It's not terribly, at least it's dark. If it were bright, it would be just not good at all, but at least it's dark, and so it's not like it's just slapping me on the face saying, yeah, I can't look at anything else. I still want to look at those leaves, and that's certainly the point I think that we have here.
And that's the exact same thing that drew my attention, was that one dark rock in the bottom right. Um, the ones underneath it don't distract me at all. They're sort of holding the leaf out of the water, it looks like.
Yeah.
And that leaf is nicely in focus there with everything else around it not. So I think that's really well done on that. And like you say, you can see all the other leaves on the bottom, but they're much more subtle because of the water and the green reflections in front of them. So
the thing that there's two things that really are working for me that I think that are really strong, and it would be interesting to see if we could maximize on this. And Bruce is commenting upper left corner is a little distracting. Yes, I believe you are right. With that element, there's a slightly bright element up in the upper left hand corner. But two things that are super working in my opinion, that it would be interesting to see if we could make them even stronger. And that is the fact that the stem of the leaf that's going underwater, it's not being cropped off the edge. If we had cropped that off the edge, I don't think I would like it as much. But then also that tip, as it points over to the right, it kind of goes up, it bends down a little bit, and it almost touches the water again, then it curves back up. And that little visual interaction right there where it just doesn't quite touch the water again, there's that visual tension that is actually quite interesting to me, and I really appreciate that interaction of the shadow of that the leaf is casting and just how that shape is being treated. And that's where, if I were in this situation, I would look to try and maximize that stem under the water and do what I can to work the composition to see if those things can come through more clearly, more presently. It's hard to, I don't want to say better because it's not, that's not necessarily the point. What would make it better is if we can communicate more strongly what our intentions are, if that makes sense. So yeah, anyway, those items I find to be pretty strong though.
They are, and the shadow of that leaf really accentuates that curve on the tip. And yeah, that's a really nice touch.
Yeah. All right, this next image, oh, I just love me a good black and white. Lots of things actually I find are working super well in this image. Let's see if we can read. Oh, this is the third one from Ian. I should have been watching. Not that this is bad or nothing. It's just I like to spread the love a little bit. That's all right. Thank you so much for submitting these images. We have some good items coming from Wales and England and the UK in this case. This is Bodiam. Is that what it says? Yeah, Bodiam Castle in the UK, and it's most definitely in the water. This has to be one of the prettiest castles in England, standing in the middle of the lake patrolled by a huge carp. I made this image in 2019 when trying to photograph the castle at sunrise, but I got skunked by the clouds again. So I went for a long exposure using a 6-stop ND filter to soften the water and clouds and processed the image in black and white. This is also the first photograph, and then I didn't hit the see more button, so I don't know what else he says about the first photograph. So I'm sorry, Ian, but here's the things that are super working for this image. I appreciate what he said with the 6-stop, so it smoothed out the water, absolutely. But every subject in the image is placed. It feels very purposefully placed. It has its position, and whether it's the branches up top, whether it's the castle, the bright clouds behind, the reflection of the castle, the grasses in the foreground, I could probably go ahead and whip out my fine-tooth comb and really start getting picky on things. I don't know that that's worth it to do, but we get different textures coming through as well. And yeah, black and whites, this just comes extra strong in the black and white. Certainly if he had left it in color, I just don't think, especially since he mentioned the color didn't work out for the sunrise, for the sky there. But yeah, what do you think there, Drake?
Well, first, I just love castles, and I've been dying to go over to the UK and see some of them and photograph them. So right away, this is a hit with me.
Sure.
And the way it's framed and in black and white, I think black and white suits castles a lot of times, being old buildings like that. The reflection in the water is nice. It comes very close to the shoreline, but you can see the entire reflection there. It's very nice. You got the clearance above the castle where the tree branches aren't quite touching it. It definitely, the sky is light above and behind the castle, so your focus is right on that. The only, again, picking minor thing out here is on the very left edge of the image. You see two spots where just a little bit of branch sticks out,
Yeah.
and just poking into the frame. I would either try to crop that out or again clone it out or somewhere just get rid of that. And that's about all that really distracts me in this photo. It again is a great location to shoot from.
Yeah. Yeah, this takes me back a little bit. 2016, I was in Krakow, Poland, photographing Wawel Castle, and while it's a completely different structure, completely different shape and everything, the ones that I liked the best off of that shoot, I converted to black and white. And there's just something about the river going by, the castle, the early morning light, and I happen to have pigeons flying in some of mine as well. And yeah, there's just it just has that magnetism of interest in my mind. I'm glad you mentioned those items on the left-hand side because they're so tiny, but they're there, and that's about the only thing that I would say you just clone them out or
One of those
crop
things
them
that
out.
once you see them, they draw the eye.
Yeah, but they're also very minor, and
They
probably
are.
half
They
the
are.
people didn't see them. So yeah, good thoughts there. Some sea stars we have up next. Nathan Goldberg took this back in 2018 along the Oregon coast at Strawberry Hill, if I remember correctly, he says. Let's see. The starfish in the tidal pool along the beach used a slower shutter speed at a half a second to get the water blur as the tide washed into the pool. Oh man, anywhere along the Washington-Oregon coast, you're going to get a good chance of getting some sea stars, these nice orange and purple sea stars. Now, in your neck of the woods, certainly you're going to have the same thing. You're just up there in Vancouver Island,
Absolutely.
the
Yeah.
southern
And
coast of Vancouver Island.
I
So,
love when you get the different color stars like this clumped
yeah,
together. Yeah.
yeah.
The unfortunate thing, to go on a short tangent, is over the last several years, there's been something called sea star wasting. And
Mm.
so a lot of them have died off, and the ones you do see a lot of times almost look like they've melted. And
Oh,
it's pretty bad. It hits, I don't know how many species there are. There's a ton of species of them, but it only hits certain ones. But the ones it has, it's really done a lot of damage to. So you don't see groups like this nearly as often as you used to.
mm.
So this is beautiful. I love the longer shutter speed, so the water is blurred, and this nice group of them that goes across there with all those different colors.
Yeah.
Uh, and there's, I'm not sure what they're called. If you look just the bottom right sea star there, there's some little green sea life there too that you see quite commonly in the waters around here. Um, so it doesn't detract at all from the image. It's
Mm-mm.
just interesting to me to see that other sea life in here as well.
Right.
But yeah, I think the image works well.
I appreciate the wider crop. I appreciate also the fact that as far as the main colorful items, there's 5 of them, so that odd number tends to work well. We can really see the texture, the glistening notion of the surface of the sea stars, and then the texture of those white dots going down the arms, the edges, the ridges, and whatnots on the arms. The texture of the rock that they're clinging to is certainly coming through very well. About the only change I would experiment with myself is the color temperature on the processing of the image. It does feel slightly cool to me, but otherwise, I think, we probably want a little bit of that coolness. It was probably, it was definitely photographed in some kind of open shade, and so it's going to have a cool sense of the light anyway. But it just feels just a little bit too cool. And that's about the only criticism I have here, because I personally find the composition, while it's somewhat centrally located and all that, it's just those 5 elements. They just have a certain interest about them. Each of their arms are they each have their own angle. They each have their own curve, and they're all one's leading from one to the next or mirroring the other one. That orangish reddish one, smaller than the purple one next to it. Both their arms reaching up go off to the left side. So there's a lot of symmetry where we need the symmetry, and then there's a lot of asymmetry where we need the asymmetry. So, certainly he didn't go out there and position these where he needs to be. We just found this natural view, and then the framing and all that with the motion, like you said, is definitely something that's working well here. All right, we have about 10 images left. Now this is an interesting one for in the water. Ronald Mead Star Trails over Santa Margarita Lake, and this, when I said in the water and I was announcing this, where I was telling the listeners to say, hey, be creative with it. And certainly we have these star reflections in the water of the lake, and even the reflection is broken up by some foreground elements. The trees in the immediate foreground, we have trees on the left-hand side. But then what we have is the curvature of the earth, or the spinning of the earth, is causing these star trails to just go crazy, gangbusters crazy with it. And we have Polaris there in the central part of the radial blur, as it were. And what do you think there, Drake, about anything about this image?
Yeah, the star trails, obviously with that big circle there, draw you right into them, and the nice reflection on the water, sort of counterbalancing what's up there. The that's the type of thing I want to do more of. I've only barely scratched the surface, so I find it quite interesting in that sense as well. Um, the Obviously, because it's longer exposure, I don't know if he's stacked multiple images or just done a really long exposure. I would guess stacked multiple images, um, but there is motion in some of the trees. Um, Interesting that some of the stuff on the left, maybe its thicker branches, seem
Hmm.
to be moving a little less. Um, I don't know. It would be nice to see if he'd been able to stack it so that he had a clear shot of the trees a little more still. Um, but the image itself is interesting like this. Um, and I mean, it gives you a sense of motion in the trees, and that obviously it's not a calm night. But to me, it makes it a little bit too soft. But I like what he's done with the reflection and the
Hmm.
creativity here. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, the idea of getting the reflection in the water itself, that certainly is a challenge
Yeah.
to pull off, I think, in its own regard. With the notion of, the stacking, I think we definitely have some evidence of the image stack going on here.
Yeah.
And the thing that becomes a super challenge, and certainly if he's watching, uh, chime in on the chat, maybe later in the Facebook group he can chime in. But in those star trails themselves, we have a certain waviness that's happening, and that usually happens if we have a little bit of a break between the images that we're shooting. So we tend to shoot maybe a couple of minutes of an exposure, 30 seconds, whatever the case is, and then we'll stack them in Photoshop so that they look like they're all done in one shot. But when we have that waviness happening, and maybe that's not the right term, but we have what feels to be a little more intensity in some of those streaks as it's coming through, but it's pulsing. That streak is pulsing, and it's very even. It happens in every single one of them. And so that happens when we have either a tiniest of movements happening in camera, so they don't stack exactly straight, or if we have a little bit of a break in the shutter speed, the shutter opening, so we have too much time between the time that the shutter closed and the next frame opened. If the earth moved too much, we then get some breaks like this, and that can be happening in that as well. So just a little bit to, again, I don't know the exact situation of what it is. If I were to see the Photoshop file and be able to pick it apart, I could tell you exactly what was wrong with it to fix those up and get those nice and sharp. But I just don't have that with me to be able to make that judgment. So I have to effectively reserve a little bit of judgment to know exactly what would be the case to cause it to come together. All right, the next image, a part of me wants to see this in black and white too, but another part of me is just like, oh, I'm so glad we have the color because it's so warm, it's so fuzzy, it's so inviting kind of an idea, and inviting in the sense of it's calm. I get a complete sense of calm. This is Gerald Sargent. He signed it on the bottom, Jerry Sargent. So I presume he goes by Jerry. But anywho, we have these trunks, these small trees-ish type trunks coming out of the water, and then fog is raising up off the surface of the water, and then we have clouds behind, and then the sunrise, I would presume, is what's coming in behind that, and giving us some really bright corners in the left and right hand side. So yeah, we've got silhouetted tree trunks and limbs and twigs basically, and there's just a bunch of them, and then all of this cottony soft goodness going on with all the fog in the water and stuff like that. What do you think there, Drake?
Yeah, the black and white would be interesting on this, but I agree that probably the color is the way to go on it. I like what it adds to the softness of it. The top left corner is maybe a little bit brighter than I would like, but this is something like it's nicely cropped.
Yeah.
You don't have too much above or below. I like the crop on it. And it's something I'd like to see printed fairly large. I think would look nice on an actual print. I really like the softness, the soft feel to it, um, and how the trees themselves in the background and that are the ones that sort of stick out, not the little stumps in the
Yeah.
foreground,
Yeah.
but the actual trees with the character on them.
Yeah, and I like those stumps in the foreground. Actually, it gives a little sense of
Yeah,
a little more sense of the presence of the place. But
that's
yes,
right.
the
I just think if they were
character.
sharp, it wouldn't
Right.
be the same. So
Right. Cool. All right. And then this next one with it's not more certainly water. That's the theme we're dealing with here. But we have these three things that are just sticking up out of the water, and then we have this gradient, natural gradient feel where it's darker on the foreground, lower portion of the frame, and it gets really bright as we go to the top of the frame. And this is by Trond Roar Eid, and there's no other context with the image, but we have these what look to be metal structures poking out of the water. They're at different angles, and then they have some kind of barnacles growing on them, it looks like. So these three elements only just kind of coming out of the void. There's just a certain mystery to this image. What do you think, Drake?
yeah, I like the abstractness to this, and it's a nice long exposure where the water is smoothed out, and like you say, it's a very pleasing gradient to it. The fact that there's three things sticking out again, that odd rule, is nice to see there.
Yeah.
If I had any one thing I'd like to see slightly different is maybe a couple of the shadows behind the back too, a little bit lighter. Not significantly, but they do draw my eye a little bit more down to them and a
Okay.
little bit off of the actual whatever the items are sticking out.
Yeah, and we might be able to counteract that. If you wanted to leave the shadows a little darker, you can counteract that with a little bit of selective sharpening right on those barnacles, and then your eye
Absolutely,
will
yeah.
just magnetize right back to it. Because to me, I kind of like the contrast of the shadows there, but I can see how what you're saying, how it kind of sort of will pull you down, pull your eye down. And another thing I really appreciate is the fact that the sizing of all these items is very different. So we
Yeah.
don't have anything that's the same. We have some variety in the size of the physical size of these objects too. All right, and he did another one, and I decided, oh, okay, I'm going to do these two. With this one, it's a rock very centrally framed. I get a sense that the camera position is extremely low to the surface of the water, just because of the angle, the reflection, and all that. But we have this really rich orange reflection underneath the object, and then it is a cooler color on top of the object, and so it just has an interesting. I would just love to have been there to see this object and to see what it took to frame up this object to make this image look the way it does, because to grab something like this out of the whatever it is as you're hiking by, you're looking at all these other things, and to see this and to be able to envision what this is going to look like, and the fact that this is going to make a good image, that takes a lot of practice. And so it would have been very interesting to have been at this location and watch Mr. I doing these doing this setup here. What do you think there, Drake?
Yeah, I like that the background around it is nice and clean. There's nothing else. You can't tell how big the area is. Looking at it, it looks like there's probably some lichen that was on it. So that gives you an idea of probably
Mm-hmm.
the scale. But if it
Right.
wasn't for that, this could be a mountain
Yeah.
in the middle of a lake or something. You wouldn't know.
Yeah.
And the shape of it is very interesting that way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, I find it quite pleasing to the eye. The reflection is nice, and it certainly almost gives a bird head like view with the reflection there.
Mm-hmm.
So it's got a lot of intrigue and mystery to it in a way. And again, with the colors fading from the lighter to the warmer on the bottom, are really nice.
All right. Excellent. And this next image, some pilings in the ocean, and they're kind of going out and receding into the water. We've got a slower shutter speed, and we've got some barnacles on these pilings. We've got some other things growing on these pilings. A little bit of out of focus clouds in the upper part of the frame. Darren Whiteley is the photographer here. Thank you, Darren, for submitting this image. And with the implied lines going out away from us, I appreciate that, and the implied shape too. And it's really interesting. I find it interesting anyway. The second set is significantly shorter pilings than the first and the third set. Otherwise, everything is very evenly tapered off. Any other thoughts that you have there, Drake?
Yeah, again, I love the motion in the water, and the length of the shutter speed here seems perfect to me. There's obviously a wave in the background, and the darkness and lightness on that, it almost breaks the top edge of some of them there. It's a little bit distracting. I don't know. It's pretty hard to time things with this so that you don't get something like that in the background. And I know when I try stuff like this, I'll take hundreds of shots to get something that I'm really happy with in the end. But this is one of those types of shots that I really enjoy looking at, because it's got that leading line that draws you farther into the water. They almost form like a triangle of poles slowly getting smaller and smaller into the water from the left side into the right. And then the water is crossing, and from there, well, it's going a couple different directions, but it drags across the poles too. So there's a lot going on in it, and yet at the same time, it's still very simple. So it's a really pleasing image.
All right. So this one also by Mr. Trond Ide, and let's see, just plain reflection from a sailboat. This is just really cropped in. We have lines, reflection lines on the water, feeling super abstract. And the reason I wanted to bring this one in is because of that abstract nature. What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, the nice waving lines on it. Like I say, the very abstract nature. If you hadn't said, or if he hadn't written that it was a sailboat, I don't think I would have any idea from the image itself.
Yeah.
I'm curious. At the very top center, there's almost a round shape there. It makes me wonder what that is. And overall, it's an intriguing image. I don't see anything really distracting a lot from it.
I would have to say it seems to me that is just from the natural undulations of the wave, but it does have a bit of a ring around it, so it does suggest maybe there's something else with whatever that is. But anyway, that was my first impression, was that round thing was more of just the fact of how the reflection came together due to the undulations of the wave. But I don't know. All right, this next one is a bird going in the water. It looks like he's hunting for food or something like that. Black-necked stilt by Matt Wellhauser. And beautiful reflection, nicely centrally composed. This is one of those items where I am so glad this was centrally composed. This is where we break that rule of thirds rule, and we just centrally compose it. The little bits of warm hues, warm color in the legs also just does it for me. And then the timing that Matt used to grab this shot where that beak is just like a 0.5 millimeter above the surface of the water is perfect for me.
I agree. It's nice to see that little gap in there. And I like the crop on it too. With the birds, you might think you want to go landscape because they're a little longer.
Sure.
But I think this works well with not a lot of room on either end, and the little bit of openness above and below them. And the nice soft colors, the blues and whites in the sky, contrast nicely with the dark bird and the the colorful legs.
All right, just 3 images left. Our first of our last 3. Jim Housley, bathing wood duck, he says. And we've got a little bit of motion blur because of the slightly slower shutter speed, but otherwise the duck is in focus for sure. And we just have, he's going crazy, or she, this duck is going crazy with shaking the water because the head is just a little bit blurry with the motion, but the water itself that's being splashed off is nicely, sharply rendered. So yeah, that duck is really going crazy with it. It is what I would hope for. I think on this image is to somehow work the subject, if possible. Again, we live in utopia zone, right? To where that background element that is nearly the same brightness and the same color as the duck is hopefully less of a distraction. And if we were to be able to have that, again, we know we're not going to go out there and move that duck and whatnot, but this is where we love the energy, I love the energy that's happening, the motion that's happening. It's just I would hope that if possible we could reduce the impression of that item in the background.
Yeah, and if you're going to go after wildlife, they're unpredictable. So I think most people are prepared to wait some time to get what they want, and that would certainly make a difference. The stick on the right side there would be nice if that wasn't quite there. I don't know if you see the one I mean, top right.
The way off to the side.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's nothing major, and yeah, a slightly faster shutter speed would have made it a little bit sharper on the duck, but that is the only area that's in focus. So your eye is very much on there. The duck is quite bright, like say, other than the little bit on the earth behind him. I don't get distracted quite as much by that, but you can see what you mean for sure.
Even cropping in a little bit, by doing that, I was just holding my hands up. By cropping in a little bit on top and bottom, you start to emphasize the nature of that water, because the fact that we have motion blur in the head, I'm not so concerned about that. I think it's all right. It's something that I think could add to it. But by cropping in, you're emphasizing the size and the scale in relation to the rest of the image of that water that is being splashed out, and those are frozen, and that's really nice to have something that is frozen there that's in focus. And so by cropping, you then emphasize those elements that are frozen, and then that element in the background, I think, becomes less of an issue to me, because while it's still present, it's just we have more emphasis visually placed on the splashing water. I almost said flipping water, but I knew that wasn't right. Oh man, this next image is some grebes, Russian grebes, also by Matt Wellhauser. And so we've got 3 of them, and I just love it when they put their heads in that position and they're just running. Basically, they're running on the surface of the water. And we have a nice fast shutter speed, so not only are the grebes frozen in space and time, but the water that they are kicking up is also frozen. And I think a crop would probably help this, because we do have some distracting elements in the background, and then it would give us even more strength right there on those 3 grebes coming through. Those are so cool with how they're going through the frame there.
Yeah, you took exactly what I was looking at there, is particularly the 2 that are partially on the top there that are already cut off anyway. For sure, if you cropped it there, and maybe even that 3rd bird on the top right, that I think it would make a much stronger image without those to distract you. But I love the position, the way they're running, their position from left to right too, with the trail of water behind them, is very nice.
Mm-hmm.
Nice colors in the photo. So I don't think there's too much other than the crop that worries me. I like the speed is nice, because the way the water is frozen so crisp in the sort of splashes it's got there.
Yeah, I think also again, I don't have the raw files. I don't know, but the chest areas, the neck on that left bird, and then the chest area especially, it feels a little bit blown out, and so I would
It
like
does,
to
yeah.
play with the whites slider to see if we can recover any of that. But otherwise, with the reflection in the water, the kicked up water, the composition otherwise, they have enough space on the left-hand side of the frame for them to run into, so we're not crowding them in, to the left of the frame. So that's beautiful in that regard. So yeah, there's tons of things working well for this image. All right, this next image, this is our next to last image. We have a Pier, David Patton. He says he recently had a trip down to Florida. Nice. And he managed to get this shot. The print turned out great as well, a 20 by 30 inch print. Awesome. I used a paper with a pearl finish. The reflection turned out great without the print being too shiny overall. Absolutely, that's good. I tried a few different things to get the shot. I was originally planning on a sunset down on the beach, but there wasn't a cloud in the sky. It was, however, pretty windy, leaving a haze over the ocean that was catching the light. So I built the composition, and then I didn't hit the see more button. I need to learn to hit that see more button so we can get the whole story in. So we have this pier coming in from the right-hand side. It leads to the middle of the frame. The pieces, maybe I should say, that really brings it together for me in an image like this are where that ocean on the left-hand side is rushing to the right-hand side, and then we have this solid object here in the right-hand side. And those things are what makes the image for me, and this is where I have a similar response as I did to the other image, and that is if we were to crop a little bit off the top and a little bit off the bottom on this one too, I think we're going to enhance the strength of the image a little bit. Now, here's where I have a little bit of trepidation to my recommendation. That is, by cropping the bottom, we might take away some things that are important to David or important to the viewer, and so that part isn't as necessary. But yes, because there's not a cloud in the sky, and I have a desire myself anyway to see a little more emphasis on that cotton candy water, just by getting rid of that negative space up above, we're going to automatically place more emphasis on the water, and that's where maybe again some other processing might bring out the water some more. I don't know. I think we're processed pretty well here, but what do you think there, Drake?
And actually, don't mind the negative space in this one too much.
Okay.
I think if we did crop on the bottom, I like the way the light reflects off that area of water that's still where there's no
Right.
movement in it. It sort of gives something else to the image,
Right.
and then it goes from the brighter color to the cool blue, and it's an interesting transition.
That's
So I
yes,
wouldn't want to
beautiful.
crop that and lose it. And like I say, the sky, I don't mind it on this. I wouldn't I wouldn't be upset if he lowered the sky a little bit, crop some of that out. But I like this image. I like the motion in the water and the way the bridge leads you out there, and it just sort of leads into nothingness. So I think because there's nothing specific at the end of the bridge that it's leading you to, having that openness there then is sort of what it becomes about to me. That's why the negative space played well for me on that.
Cool. In our last image, Jerry Sargent once again talk about color. We have lots of really warm color here. And let's see what he added here. I thought I would add another in the water photo. This one is also at Canyon Lake and is a stone walkway under high water levels that used to lead to a boat dock, which is now long gone. And I think that's the transition I like here is the hand railing, the stone walkway, the very long exposure, which smooths out the clouds, smooths out the water. Lots of good things going on in this image. Really, compositionally, I am not able to find anything that I would seek to change, except for I just noticed on the very far left, there's a break in that hand railing item. And so we have a piece of hand railing just kind of sticking its little head in for, just a tiny amount there. Where it breaks. It is right in line with the tree line, horizon shore tree line, whatever you call it. So I missed it on first go around, but I would seek to crop just about 2% or 3% off the left side there. But otherwise, I can't find anything compositionally that I would want to change. I do find, I believe, the tonalities, the saturation and the warm hues is just a touch rich for my liking, but sometimes it can feel really close to that too. So anyway, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, it is right up there. Normally, I don't like things really heavily saturated. That's something you see a lot of on Instagram, but in this case, I don't think it's too far. I absolutely wouldn't go any farther than this. But I like that about the image. It's very warm. I did notice that same railing on the left, and I do think if you ignore that, but you notice the ends of the railings,
Yeah.
I think we're slightly closer to the left side. So I'd like to see it cropped just so that we're have an even amount of space on either side of the railing, and either crop or clone out that little piece of railing that's sticking in there on the left. That is the only thing I think that is at all off on this. The water is nice and milky, long exposure, and the motion in the sky is very pleasing. And I like the fact that you can see that little tree just on the upper right third there of the image.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I super enjoy on this image is just that texture in the foreground. The rock that's covered with water, the texture that's coming through there, the reflections, that just it offers a really nice contrasting texture to what those clouds in the water are. And so that really satisfies my eyeball anyway. So all right. Well, that pretty much wraps it up. That's our last image for tonight, and I have two last things actually to tell you all about. And the first thing I want to tell you about is the topic for March is just spring flowers. So Facebook has changed things up on us a little bit. When you're in the Facebook group and you're wanting to submit an image, all you have to do now is do a hashtag, and then you do what we're going to just call it spring flowers. So hashtag SPRINGFLOWERS, and then that will mean that I'll be able to grab those very easily and do just like we did this time for next month. So towards the end of the month is when we'll plan to have the live session, and then we will get that announced at a later date, of course. But Thursdays seem to have been working out for us, so it likely will be a Thursday towards the end of the month, but we'll see on that. Excuse me. And then another thing I want to mention out to you guys is a workshop that I'm going to be doing. And that workshop I'm calling Waterfall Color. It is happening on Minnesota's North Shore, and it's going to be September 19th through 24. So right now, really, I'm just kind of giving you a little bit of a teaser about it. And I don't have the website page on that finalized just yet. I'm getting really close to it. I just wanted to bring it to your attention. When I do have it all done, I'll come back here into this description on this video, and I'll add the link in there. So if you end up seeing that link, then you know you're good. You can go and take a look at that and see what we're doing there. The beautiful thing about Minnesota's North Shore is you have so many waterfalls. You've got fall color, and it's just going to be an amazing experience. So I hope to see you out there on Minnesota's North Shore of Lake Superior while we just find all these gorgeous rivers, fall color, and have a lot of fun with it. All right, Drake, thank you so much for being here. I really, really appreciate you spending the time with me going over these awesome images from the podcast listeners. It's been a fantastic experience. I enjoy it. This is easily one of the best things of my month. And I'm just really glad to have you here along this journey with me once again. So thank you.
Thanks, Brett. It's been great. Enjoyed looking at all the interesting photos everybody had sent in, and always enjoy chatting with you.
Awesome. And everyone out there in YouTube land and Listenerville, thank you so much for being here. I really do appreciate it. Let me know what you think. Put those comments down below. Send me an email, brent@latitudephotographypodcast.com, or join the Facebook group over there on Facebook. You will need to answer a couple of questions. The host of the show, of course, that's me. You can also put in Drake's name if you like. And we'll just catch you next time. So if not here on YouTube, find us, in your favorite podcatcher. If you've not listened to Latitude Photography Podcast, give us a listen. We've got a fantastic episode we just published a couple of days ago on understanding your photography. It's a deep dive understanding what is important about your photography and what makes you tick as a photographer. It's a great listen. I hope you join us there in the audio only version as well as here on YouTube. Thanks so much. Until next time, happy shooting.
Thanks.